monumental events seem to be cascading before us, even by our postmodern appreciation of time. And what this points to is that what we are living through and experiencing at this point in time is the faltering and collapse of the economic system and model that has carried us through the last 200 years of Western civilization, from the fall of Louis XVI and the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, and up until our present age of bankrupt republics and the reign of terror that has gripped England. And with the end of the American century, which was in effect the last cumulative stage of the capitalist age, the United States, far from the Iranians' Manichean embodiment of the great Satan, has proved that behind its massive projection of power over the last 60 years lies what is in essence an empty bank vault. Today, American intellectuals who once discussed American power in terms of a unipolar world sit around and try to reinvent the America that will rise from the current crisis it faces. And Europe, which exported to America the embryonic capitalism whose overgrown offspring it would be forced to adopt after the Second World War, is in a similar state of crisis. With such deep-seated entropy manifesting itself in the very foundation of the capitalist structure, this causes undeniable cleavages in societies. And it is not the state of English culture or the lack thereof that is to blame for Cameron's failure to invent his Great Society, but an acute economic constriction of an underclass. The political mechanism and the leaders which it produces have failed them. The fact that around the world today such social instability is manifesting itself with a common underlying narrative points towards an acute crisis of legitimacy, and therefore the functional demise of the political system that has developed in this age. And in order to understand the crisis of this legitimacy, we must look at the political process in the age of capitalism from above. And from here we can see that the most important characteristic of the political structures in the age of capitalism is the functional separation of the political from the economic. And when such an unnatural divorce happens, the economic always subjugates the political. Regardless of the camps chosen by nations in the geopolitical frameworks which existed in this age, from the Napoleonic to the Cold Wars, the economic model has been the same. This economic castration of the political meant that political legitimacy had to be manufactured through an artificial process. And so, while the usurious economic model developed and overdeveloped, the political claimed ever more utopian aims in order to justify the actions of an inherently powerless class of career politicians and dictators alike. This allowed for a fantasy to legitimize the political process in the eyes of the ruled, and to create an intellectual realm in which it would be acceptable that the economic question, the fundamental economic question, could be divorced from the actions of society. And this fantasy took the form of ideology. It is from this process that allowed a private capitalism to face off with a state capitalism during the Cold War. And it is from this process that the specter of terrorism allowed for America's and the West's bankrupting wars of the last decade. What we see today is the logical result of these two diverging vectors. Of, on the one hand, a capitalist economic model, and on the other, the political ideologies that were constructed carefully around it. We now have a political class that is powerless in the face of a crisis that was caused by the result of an economic system, the result of the actions of a minority in a society that capitalism creates. And with this collapse of capitalism is twinned the end of the age of political ideology. There are questions that need to be asked of our generation. What are we rioting for? What exactly are we looking for? And where do we aim to go? We must equip ourselves properly in order to maneuver through this age of change in such a way that it takes us to a position of strength and steers us away from being entrapped in a quest for unattainable ideals. For that would destroy the gift that we have been given to live in a time of such change and tumult, and to be able to shape the world in which we live. Islam is without ideology. It must be separated from an Islamism which was based and founded on the fundamental fallacy that the Muslims are weak, and so aimed to create a utopia that was little more than a second-rate capitalist state. If we look at governance in Islam, which is a body of knowledge that has been closely guarded and protected by the great Muslims over the last 1400 years, we see that it has nothing to do with ideas and ideals, but rather it is intricately connected to the natural state of man and man in community. The main function of governance in Islam is to ensure the circulation of wealth, just as a healthy body needs a healthy circulation of lifeblood. And legitimacy is founded upon this function, so that power is based on ensuring that zakat is taken from those with wealth and distributed amongst those without it. This means that in Islam, the political is not separated, but is rather based on the economic. And that means that in Islam, it is a politics of true power. By taking on Islam as a perspective, and particularly in the light of its political model, we can begin to achieve the task of our generation, which is a reconnection of the economic and the political with the realities of the world in which we live, and to put back the imbalance of a world that for 200 years has been living in unnatural excess. Our generation must begin to re-evaluate the times in which we live. This is our task, and these are the times in which we live in. And it is hoped that over the next installments of this program we shall look at different events through this perspective in order to start this process of re-evaluation. Assalamu alaikum.